So, hello everybody. Today I'm going to do another talkie, and I'm really getting used to this format because it means I can do it from my sofa. But before we start, I want to preface this with a disclaimer. No, I have not been watching Stranger Things lately, and the fact that I'm going to talk about Vecna is completely unrelated to anything that's happening in current pop culture because I stopped watching Stranger Things years ago. So I've already given it away. Today I'm going to talk about Vecna. I have bought 3 print-on-demand adventures that have Vecna as the main villain from DM's Guild. Die Vecna Die, Vecna Lives, and Vecna Reborn. So basically the actual order in which they were published are Vecna Lives, Vecna Reborn, and then Die Vecna Die. Before I go into Vecna Lives and Vecna Reborn, a couple of words on print on demand. If you live in Europe, the way this works is the stuff is printed in the UK, which can pose problems because sometimes they fill in the forms incorrectly, so then you have to pay excise duties. But if you then contact DM's Guild, you will get refunded. The quality of the print is very good to excellent. Again, it kind of depends on the quality of the PDFs that they can work with. There is one book where the print is kind of a little bit hazy, but the other ones are excellent, but they're all fully readable and serviceable. And I'm actually glad that they offer print on demand because while I like PDFs to upload them into Roll20, and yes, if you've got a Plus, a subscription or higher, you can now upload PDFs and they don't um, get into your quota, and you can use them as well while you're playing and you can show them to players. It's a great thing. Anyway, so DM's Guild has done a really brilliant job bringing these out, and the delivery and everything was fine. So, first of all, who is Vecna? Well, depending on who you listen to, Vecna is probably the most powerful wizard that ever was in the world of D&D. He originally stems from Earth, so i.e. Greyhawk, and he was a terrible person. When you read Vecna Lives for the first time, you actually get a little bit of an insight into what he is like as a person. He's not a nice man at all. And one day he's got and that's quite important as well. He's got a first in command, second in command, right hand man called Cuss, who has a sword of Cuss. Cuss tried to kill him, but Cuss tried to kill Vecna, but then he didn't manage to and was killed instead. And yeah, Vecna then became a lich. And now he's basically trying to, in Vecna Lives, he's trying to become a god. And Vecna Lives is set in Greyhawk, but today in 5th edition, Greyhawk simply doesn't exist any longer. You could possibly set it anywhere. I guess you could set it, I don't know, in Midgard if you wanted to, in Alabar. It would work. It's not a problem at all. So, I will also preface this with the following. I have read and watched reviews of Vecna Lives before, and they were devastatingly bad. And I thought, okay, well, how bad can this actually be? They are scathing. And then I read the module, and I can only say yes, they were completely right. It's a really badly written module, one which I wouldn't want to run, and one which I definitely wouldn't want to play in. And when I say it's a bad module, it's not because Zeb Cook, who is responsible for this piece of work, prefaces it with, this adventure is meant to kill characters. If you are a DM that cannot bring himself to kill a player's prized character or one who can get pressured into, give a guy a break, you must be extra strong when running Vecna Lives. Um, yeah. I mean, I honestly, this was written in a day and age when old school was all the rage, and when people didn't really care about their characters that much. When you had like one gazillion henchmen, I mean, it is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and when this idea of role playing was in its infancy, and where basically, D&D is was what Call of Cthulhu still is today. The crew is expendable. Now, the story itself is very simply told. Vecna wants to become a god. He already has followers on Earth, i.e., in Greyhawk. There is a cult of Vecna, and Vecna, since he's so powerful, has managed to, well, through machinations and magics, let's call it this way. So he's done a lot of hand waving and muttering of weird words, has managed to subdue a certain type of magic. So scrying, divination, etc. are no longer possible. And this is the first time that people actually realize that something's wrong, because certain types of magic simply stop working. And then what happens is that the the players are invited to the first session, and then their character sheets are taken away from them. And they are told you can't play your character. Everybody's like, what? And then you give them uh, different characters. And they become a member of the Circle of Eight. Now, the Circle of Eight, if you know Greyhawk, and I admit that I don't, because I'm not very well steeped in D&D lore anyway, but the Circle of Eight is a group of wizards and sorceresses that essentially run, guide, and protect Greyhawk. They're the power behind everything. Um, and then you've got Mordenkainen in there as well, and he's the leader of this circle. So, um, and you are sent to some kind of, well, it's like a tumulus, it's a mound, and in that mound resides Halmadar the Cruel, who's dead, and he came into possession of the Iron Hand of Vecna, which are two artifacts of Vecna. And he is then going to try and break out of his prison slash burial chamber. And you've got the following guys are present: Tensa, Bigby, Otto, Dravnji, Nistul, Rari, Otilyuk, and Jalarazi. So at least Tensa and Bigby are known because they've got spells named after them. And these guys go in there, or these ladies, because there is also a couple of women. There are lots of traps in there. And then this guy, this Vecna Halmadar actually seems to think that he may be Vecna or is channeling him or whatever, gets out of his coffin and kills everyone. And it reads here, by the end of this section, you've just destroyed the entire secret ruling class of the city of Greyhawk, the keepers of the balance and the watchdogs against the rise of chaos and tyranny. Now there's nothing to check either the forces of law or chaos. Well, yes, this sudden power vacuum in Greyhawk is intentional. There you are. So now your players have just witnessed that that the most powerful people in Greyhawk have been destroyed by this thing. And now you have to bring in your players again and say, well, you know what? Now it's your turn. And you're going to go, what the fuck? Because obviously I'm not Tensa, I'm not Bigby, I'm not whoever they are, and they didn't stand a chance. Why would I even want to go there? And then you hand the player copies of the second set of pre-generated characters, the followers of the Eight. So again, This is AD&D, so everybody has a henchman, and basically Bigby has somebody called Ortux, he's a paladin. Jalarzi has Mariel, she's a mage. Nistul has Yars. We've got a fighter, illusionist. We've got a priest in there, Johanna, blah, blah, blah. And then you take those, and then it says once the players are comfortable with their new characters, you can begin the adventure. So while they're telling you at the very beginning, you need to be able to kill beloved characters of your players, now you realize you won't have to because they're gonna get different characters anyway. So, well, anyways. So now basically follows a meeting with Mordenkainen. In a way, Mordenkainen seems to be a real dick. So I wouldn't really want to meet him. And then they start researching stuff to find out what the hell is actually going on. Then they have a teleconference with Mordenkainen, during which they are attacked, and there they meet people who carry a little sign. It's a desiccated hand with an eye in its palm, so it's like a little bit of a pendant or something. So obviously these people are followers of Vecna. Then you do a lot of research, which is the part that I actually like best about this whole module, because it is so well detailed where in the city of Greyhawk you can go, what kind of things you can find, who you meet in the different places that you go, in the College of Mages, in the library. I really love that part. So if I'm ever going to set anything in a city, I'm actually going to take this, because I've also got the City of Greyhawk box set, which I got from DM's Guild, and I'm totally going to use the City of Greyhawk, although I'm going to retheme it. I'm not going to call it Greyhawk, but that's something that you can really use. You could build a whole story around this, how to research casts and how to research Vecna. That is brilliantly done. Um, I would also like to add that they've got really lovely maps. And you learn things about a place that is a gnome warren called Osnabrück. And in Osnabrück, apparently, Cass went and took his sword and sunk it into the earth, and everything collapsed onto that sword. And he made the gnomes the keepers of this sword, and now they have to keep it forever until somebody who is worthy comes along, whatever that may be, whenever that may be, or whoever that may be. But in the meantime, while they are researching, of course, there are other people that are following him and following you guys, and of course that's the cult of Vecna. But then there are other people as well. There's the cult of Ayuz. Ayuz is a lawful evil god who really doesn't like Vecna, and he's kind of like beginning to think, oh my god, that Vecna guy, that could get really messy. Then there is a group of people called the Rene. The Rene are a tribe of semi-nomadic river gypsies. This is a direct quote, located on the reaches of the Salintan River. So they're like River Vistani. Some of them work with Vecna, so they're a little bit like, the Vistani in Barovia. Some of them work with Strahd, some of them don't. And basically, you are being watched now, and people are trying to follow you. And then there's kind of like different people can attack you, blah blah blah. And so you basically then at some point travel to Verberbonk, or Osnabrück. That really depends on what you want to do. In Verberbonk, there are different things that can happen to you. There's a description of the city where you can, and again, the city parts are really well done. I also again like the little maps that they've included. And then after a while, if they have managed to realize that they need to go to Osnabrück, and for some reason I'm absolutely unclear why there would be any question that they need to go there, but they keep saying, well, if your players don't get that they need to go there, and you kind of go, what the fuck, they should know because it's been said so many times, but maybe, I don't know. Um, uh, Unless somebody says you now go to Osnabrück and this is how you get there. Back then players didn't do it. Anyway, they go to Osnabrück, and they basically then also get I suppose they get the sword of Cass. So um, that's great. Um, there's also a story around that which I really like. So basically, the gnomes have been attacked, and the gnome matriarch is almost dying, but she refuses. Well, she's now stable, but she's got a broken hip, so she's like 1 gazillion years old, and I mean anybody who breaks their hip is in bad shape anyway, and a lot of people die from it because there is a lot of internal bleeding. But she's basically refusing all help because she says, well, heal my people first. Then she puts the players to the test, and the test is so lovely that I'm not going to describe it because it really broke my heart, but it's so cute and it's just sweet. And I'm being absolutely honest here. And then they are subjugated to a really rigorous cleansing ritual where you go into a sweat hut and people can have hallucinations, and it's really nicely done. And depending on what happens, you all get a new name, but the name is basically what happens during the things that the players basically role play, which I think is really well done. And then they get the sword, which is a lot less problematic than one might think. They basically just get it. They are taken to the warren where the sword is, and the sword just basically makes itself known and flies towards one of the characters, who what we would call, in modern terms, attunes to it. And this sword will now tell him exactly where, in which direction to find Vecna. And it turns out that Vecna is somewhere southwest of where they are, and the place is called um, Tovak Baragu, or Tovak Baragu, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And it's essentially a stone circle that is not unlike Stonehenge. And when they get there, they see that there's the journey is really long. It's like dozens of days, but you can fly. It makes it faster. And they even say, well, you know what, players will not enjoy 4 gaming sessions of traveling. I'm like, yeah, well, then, maybe you should have done that differently, because not everybody has access to flying um, implements, but somehow maybe you do, and if you don't, then well, I mean, even then, I would say don't even put them through 4 days of 4 sessions of traveling. Just hand wave it. I mean, because at the end of the day, nothing important happens, because even when you get too close to um, Tovak Baragu, which is supposed to be super, super dangerous, nothing happens because uh, the area is dangerous, and the tribes are super dangerous and stuff. But then when you get there, the tribes have been completely subdued, and they're basically sitting around this huge plain where the stone circle is situated, and they just basically watch. And then, oh, the big reveal, you get to the stone circle, and then a guy that you have known for a long while, who's actually an avatar of Vecna, is standing there, and it turns out that, hey, this guy is Vecna. So this kind of drunk sea captain, or yeah, I don't even know if he's a captain with a peg leg, is actually a super powerful demigod. And basically, then the Stonehenge arches are either gates or windows into different worlds, into the past, into the present, into the future, into different planes, and some of them have been activated. And the idea is that you need to step through one of them to get to a place called um, Citadel Cavicius, or Cavicius, which is again super spooky, and some of you may know it because it is also described a little bit in Planescape, and of course in the I don't know if it's in Van Richten's guide to Ravenloft for 5th edition. I didn't. I've got the book, but I can't read it at the moment because I'm playing Strahd, and I don't want to spoil myself. But in the old 2nd edition AD&D Domains of Dread guide, of course, Citadel Cavicius is described because Vecna Reborn is set in Ravenloft, and Citadel Cavicius is in the Burning Peaks domain. And basically, the citadel is shaped like a skull, and you need to search for cars. And this is where the module again fails. I mean, it fails in the whole story of, oh, you're being followed, blah, blah, blah. All of this didn't really work. All of the stuff that happens in the cities, like the research and stuff and trying to find information, that worked really well, but everything else was actually really badly written. And now we've got Citadel Cavicious. That is the place where Vecna imprisons all the people that he doesn't like. I mean, just think of the potential that this has. And it's completely wasted because you have 1, 2, 3 pages of description of what can happen, and it's all terribly boring, and it is a completely missed opportunity. Um, I was actually very, very, very disappointed because that could have been, I'm not saying a module onto itself, but the amount of pages that went into doing research in Greyhawk into who's Vecna, what the hell is going on, blah, 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 which I really liked, is for a certain type of player. And not necessarily the AD&D player way back when, where it wasn't the people who were necessarily into doing a lot of research. Let's do some more library use roles. This would have been a way of, you know, really putting tension into this, of really making this horrific, because they're telling you at the beginning, this module is like a horror movie. No, it isn't, because it's actually not very horrific at all. Unless you say the horror is that everyone you run this module with will hate you afterwards because it's terribly boring and people die. And then you just have to generate new characters, which in AD&D was a chore. So that alone would generate horror. So this would have been a way of actually inducing horror. Just think about it. You've got this city where you have undead, all kinds of undead creatures, where you have the living that have been imprisoned by Vecna, and they live side by side. And interestingly enough, the negative energy of this city is so strong that the undead, like werewolves, like vampires, don't need to feed on the living because they get enough essence just out of the negativity of this place. This, in and of itself, would have lent itself to 2 to 3 sessions easily of just exploring the city. And it kind of reminded me of The Slumbering Tsar by Frog God Games. Once you've managed to get into Tsar, that is a huge dungeon, which is a city. It can be done. This would have meant, of course, that somebody who can really describe horror, and I'm not saying that this is easy, but Zeb Cook obviously wasn't the man for this, nor would I be the woman for this, because writing horror is super, super difficult, especially in role-playing games, because what is horrific for a character isn't necessarily horrific for the player, and what's horrific for the player may not be what you can induce through a module. Creating horror at the table is something that's really difficult, but one could have tried. They didn't, they failed. So basically, after about 3 pages, you meet Cass. You need Cass, blah, 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 because, if you give away the sword, then he will actually leave you there, and you're basically screwed because you can't get out of there. So you basically have to kind of divine that he can find a way out for you because he's got a helmet of interplanal, blah, 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 shifting, blah. But you should not give him the sword, because if you do, then you're screwed. So you have to get him somehow to completely, and he's a vampire, by the way, to completely believe you and enter into a bargain that he will uphold. Now, I don't know why somebody who's evil would uphold a bargain, even if he strikes it with you, but hey, who knows? At the end of the day, and I really like this because the way this is described. If the characters foolishly give over the sword without first taking some kind of precautions, I wonder what those might be, Cass seizes it and uses the plane-shifting power to escape. He does not go to Earth, since the only place not blocked by Vecna's growing power is Tovak Baragu, and he really doesn't want to meet Vecna again. but some other plane where Vecna will not find him. The characters will have to find some other way home. It's not described how this works, but from what I can tell, it's actually impossible. If the characters are wise, they enforce their terms with real threats against Cass's life. Cass is an undead, super powerful vampire. We've got those henchmen characters um, that, you know, how are they going to enforce this? I don't know. The vampire has no desire to be destroyed when escape is so close. If a realistic threat can be made, he fulfills the bargain, whatever that may be. He tells them what he knows and uses the plane-shifting power to send them back to Tovak Baragu. How nice of him. Once the deal is made, Cass tells the group what he knows. It is really simple. The PCs cannot kill Vecna. He's immortal. Neither can they use the sword of Cass against him, as Cass learned long ago that it is ineffective. So now we get to the meat and bones of all of this. Basically, you can't do anything. You are unable to change the story at all. So basically, you go back to Tuvok Baragu if you've managed to somehow get Cass to help you by threatening him. Well, I don't know, maybe if you don't help us, we will pull your teeth. Anyway, so you end up in Tuvok Baragu. You're completely overmatched by Vecna's power. Everything is terrible. So now you need to find a way to kill him anyway. And how do you do this? Well, you remember that there was this cult of Ayus, this lawful evil god, terrible person. They basically got involved with the players along the way at some point. Yeah, it's all kind of like really absolutely railroady, and unless you actually let the Ayu's followers interact with the players, they will not know about this anyway. And then the idea is that that the players come to the conclusion that they should invoke Ayuz, who then comes and helps them and fights it out with a dear Vecna and hopefully kills him or destroys him somehow. That's how this ends. Now, chapter 12, when all is done, is the last chapter. It takes less than a page. If the characters win, then all is well. If Vecna wins, then nothing's well. Vecna's victory does change the nature of Greyhawk dramatically. First and foremost, the demigod is immediately elevated to the status of greater god. See the Legends and Lore hardback book for details. And all other gods are reduced by one rank, so that Vecna is the only greater god in Greyhawk. Demigods, except Ayus, wither and fade for lack of power from their worshippers. I don't understand why Ayus doesn't, because if I was Vecna, I would actually destroy him. With his ascendancy, Vecna ushers in a new reign of terror over Earth. Well, the Circle of Eight are dead anyway. Who cares? Mordenkainen, and he's an idiot. The forces of evil are given great rewards and powers, while the defenders of good struggle to stem the tide. The great kingdom becomes a resurgent force and begins a march of conquest over the good lands. The city of Greyhawk falls under the sway of evil oligarchs. The giants of the crystal mist mountains grow in strength. Blah, blah, blah. So that's the end of the module. And yes, it is as bad as I've described it. Um, what I do like about it are the illustrations. They are really good, and I really love the maps. And of course, I like the descriptions of the different places in Greyhawk where you can do research. You could totally use this for something else when you have a city where you want your characters to do research. You can just take those people, they are named, they have really good character descriptions, what they like from players, how the players should interact with them, what they can get if they play them well, blah, blah, blah. This is really well done. I also really like the whole story with a gnome. So if I ever have a gnome warren and I want people to enjoy the gnome warren or go through some kind of purification ritual, that's where you would find this information. It's really well done. You can grab this and shove it into any adventure. I really love the maps. They really, really, they're really well done. I really like them. Uh, the story itself is terrible. The way it's written is terrible. It has no player agency. It's boring. The only tension that ever comes up is, oh, will we survive this, or should I basically roll up another character? I mean, if I was playing this after like the second session, I would probably go home, create three more characters, and just bring them just in case I need them. Um, and yes, it's as bad as everybody says, but that is just Vecna Lives. Vecna Reborn, however, is a completely different story, but that shall be told another time. Bye!